And good evening, everybody. Welcome to Candidate Profile here on Political Focus, here on Channel 6 TV. Glad you could join us tonight. I'm Kenny Fogel, and hopefully we'll do our best to inform and educate a little bit. November 4th is not that far away, and we're going to be having an election coming up pretty soon, and we know a lot of people may be getting interested in what's going on. Some may not be so much, but again, we'd like to have an informed electorate when we go to the polls, and that's why we're here tonight. We got Fred Hagan here with us tonight, and Fred, I don't know if I could describe him as an incumbent or as a challenger, because Fred's been on the city council before. But Fred, tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your status.
Okay, well, I'm from Nelson County. I grew up in New Haven. After that, I went to the University of Kentucky, got a degree in electrical engineering, married shortly thereafter. And my wife, Pat, and I have lived here for the last 21 years. And since we've been here, we've both been involved in a lot of different things, Red Cross, Habitat for Humanity, on and on. She's now on the board of directors of the Carrying Place in Lebanon. I do handyman work at the Carrying Place in Lebanon. So we're both very involved in the community. I have a background in, as I said, electrical engineering. I have an MBA from Bellarmine College. I have a background in engineering management, project engineering, plant engineering. I've worked in industry for the last 30 years or so. So I bring a lot of that experience to the city council, and I used that when I was on the city council. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And you also find time to do some woodworking. I've seen
yes,
some of this stuff you do.
Yes, I'm an avid woodworker, and I've been doing that for about 30 years, and I've turned it into a hobby, into a little bit of a sideline business since then. But I make furniture, repair furniture, and I'm generally a Mr. Fix-It. And both with my hands, and I like to think with my mind too.
Well, I'm a Mr. Break-It, so you work well, just fine here. Okay. But again, you were on the city council before, so actually you know what you're getting into.
Yes,
so
I
basically, do. And you got off for a while, so you're ready to go back to see what's going on.
I ran essentially 4 times in a row. 2004 I was elected, 2006 I was elected, 2008 I ran, I was not elected. And actually, during those 2 years, the mayor asked me to serve as a planning commissioner, so I was a planning commissioner for 2 years. I ran again in 2010, was elected, so served those 2 years. And then in 2012, I did not run, so now I'm running again. So yes, I was a councilman for 6 years, so I know what I'm getting into.
Well, you're going to provide a wealth of knowledge for anybody watching this tonight, especially some of the candidates that are maybe running against you as well. But still, you've seen the city from the inside, you've seen it from the outside. So what is your assessment of what the issues are really? I mean, we know what the issues are with the average taxpayer, yes, but you see it from a different angle.
Well, my main concern or issue, or the thing I would try to do most if I run, is to develop a written, comprehensive, council-approved long-term plan. I think a written long-term plan is essential for the city of Bardstown for us to manage our affairs properly. And you can point to many things you read in the paper about some of the angst that comes up every year when the budget is presented. I went through it 6 years, so I know what's going on there. And the council is expected in a month's time to look at a budget presented by the mayor and then decide. And the first thing that comes in one's mind when he's making those decisions is, well, what should the right amount be? How much should we be spending? And without some knowledge of each department and what's the nuts and bolts of a department, take the fire department. What's our equipment needs? How many people do we need? What's our long-term plan for a building? Are we going to operate out of the existing fire station for how many years? Those kinds of things. So one's left to just look at, well, how much did we spend last year? Well, let's spend that this year. And it becomes a lesson in frustration. I've been through it. I know exactly. My contention is, we have the current budget, general fund is $7.5 million. You couldn't find an industry in the country probably that has that big of a budget that doesn't have some kind of a long-term plan. And I think with a plan that we, the council and the mayor, would work on all year, and understand what the needs of other departments, that when we come to the budgeting process, when something is presented in a budget, it's not oh, what's that? The council's already seen that. I think it would help us on things like planning for our water source, and many of the needs we have, street repair, fire department, garbage, wastewater, water treatment, all of those, I think would really help us run the council, run the city more smoothly if we had a long-term plan.
Well, absolutely. You're talking about the budget. I mean, I know there's been times when the budget, when they start a program and they say, well, we don't know exactly how much we're going to raise, and we don't know what we're going to do it if after we get the money. I mean, well, it's not really well thought out sometimes.
Well, I see the budget as starting with on the needs side. Mm-hmm. What do we need, and then what will it take to fund that? Then look at the revenue side. Okay, do we have that revenue? Yes. No. If we have the revenue, then we can fund those things. But the way the budget by default has to work, the size of the budget is dictated by the amount of revenue coming in. Mm-hmm. There have been some recent discussions in the paper when the budget came up, where the budget's growing. Why is the budget growing? Yeah. The budget grows because the income grows. The budget size is dictated by the amount of income. That's just, there's no other way to do that. Mm-hmm. The question becomes on the spending side. The money comes in, now what is it spent for? And rather than just taking what's coming in and divvying it up, I suggest we start on the needs side. What do we need? Do we have the funds? And then if there are additional funds, that opens up a whole other question of, should the revenue stream be adjusted? Mm-hmm. Should we take less out of the utility side to fund the general fund? We've historically done $500,000 from the utility side to the general fund. This year is $350,000. I think it could be lower, possibly be zero, which then opens up a question of what are the extra funds that are in the utility fund done. Well, then that maybe you look at rate adjustments to the rates. Look at long-term capital planning. None of that takes place in a formal manner. Another example, the Tannery Hill purchase that the city is doing. Mm-hmm. Larry Green was quoted in the paper as saying that's been in our plans for a long time to do that. That's been in conversation, that's been discussed. I can remember talking about it, but in my world, if it's not written down, it's not a plan. Mm-hmm. That's something, those are the kind of things, if they were written, when the new councilmen come in, how do they know what the plan is unless they have something written? So I would like to have a written plan, and I started that with, and this is something I did before I went off the council, mm-hmm. that I put together. I spent many hours putting together this long-term plan because I was the chair of the long-term planning committee, mm-hmm. and I developed this. I published it. I gave it to all the other councilmen and the mayor, and I couldn't get any legs. Quite honestly, I spent a lot of time on it, and there it is. But it's still a good something to start with, mm-hmm. and I think it would really help the city in its planning. If
you find some opposition to a long-term plan, or you feel like the people are just not ready for something?
I think the opposition was, well, there wasn't any enthusiasm for it, mm-hmm. which I had and still do. That, well, we've never had one. The long-term plan should be done by the department heads, and I'm not suggesting the department heads wouldn't be involved mm-hmm. in a wastewater treatment plant long-term plan, because, right. But there was just a sense of we've never done it, we don't need it, how would we do it? And I guess in my background, I'm so used to having long-term plans in industry that it's just a 3 to 5 year plan that it really just, to me, it was like it's an obvious thing we should do. But I couldn't get any real enthusiasm for it. I don't think the mayor supported it very much, which the mayor has to support it for it to happen. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something I really want to look. And part of that would be a lot of these things we've talked about, like water and other things. That would just be part of that plan rather than it being a separate thing done on the side.
Well, obviously, you work with the constituents for many years, and you hear some people come in, they like what you do, some people don't. Obviously, we got controversy sometimes, a little with the road diet, whether you want to yes. spray for mosquitoes or not, yes. or just a variety of things. Planning and zoning is always a hot button issue.
Right.
But that's something you're prepared to get right back into.
Well, yeah, and I was a planning commissioner for 2 years, and I was a councilman for 4 years, then a planning commissioner for 2 years. And those last 2 years I was a councilman, I had a much greater understanding of what planning and zoning does. And there's a lot of nuances to the authority and the responsibility of the different historic review board, of course the planning commissioners, the city, and many people do not understand those, and that's where we have a lot of this mm-hmm. controversy. People say, well, it makes sense, we should do something. And, well, maybe it makes sense, but the ordinance is against whatever that might be. And you need to take the emotion out of those things and understand what these rules and regulations are, and it really helps. It helped me a lot. It helped me take some of the emotion out of it and understand, okay, here's what the Planning Commission does, here's what the City Council does, and they do different things.
And you're feeling having something in writing gives you a much more concrete direction than just, okay, what are we going to do this week?
I'm absolutely that way. I have always been that way. It saves you from having to make an emotional decision. If it's in a regulation or it's written, and maybe you decide that's not right, well, you still follow the regulation and then change the regulation. That's the way to do it.
Well, I usually ask a challenger, what would you do differently? But like I said, you've been there, so is it something you would like to see a continuation of, or something you see that drastically needs to be changed on City Council right now?
I don't think there's any drastic changes, unless you accept that a long-term plan would be a drastic change. I think the format, the process works. I just think we could be a little cleaner, and we could reduce some of the tension or the controversy that's in a city council meeting between the councilman and the mayor. That's really not a good situation, and I think that could be helped by a plan.
Well, there's a lot of other things. Bardstown's growing. Obviously, that's a big thing. It's been annexed. Has been an issue for several years. There's new industry coming in, so it's as you mentioned before, it's a pretty big business now. It's not a small town atmosphere that it used to be years ago.
Well, and I look back in 2011, the budget was $6 million, and now it's $7.5 million. So you're up $1.5 million over that amount of time, and it's from the increased income from the occupational tax, and there are some other small things, but there have been some annexations in that time. So that the utility side has grown quite a bit, but that's mostly a pass through. So it's.
Well, is there anything basically you think we've left out that the world needs to know about the city council, or needs to know about Fred Hagan a little bit before we get into election time?
Well, I guess the other thing I'd like to talk about a little bit that I did when I was on the council was the water. I think that's something that we really need to look at. In 2011, we had a study done by a company called Convirons, and it was a good study. I was the chair of the water committee at the time. So right before I left in November of 2012, I put together a study or an analysis of this Convirons study. I presented this to the mayor and the city council, and this is something I would like for us to get back on. And we did that. We had that study conducted. It was a good study, but we really haven't done anything with that. And we've talked about that for a long, long time. And I'm not going to go into all of the details, but I think that's something we can get back on. I do have a website, hagan4bcc.com. I'm going to put all of this on there so people can see what I've done. And it's I can even give you a copy, Kenny, if you like, of course. But that's something that I'd like to see us do is look on the water, and that again is part of our it's a part of our long-term plan.
Well, water supply obviously is a limiting factor when you're looking for new industry or anything else for that matter, because there's only a finite source.
Well, it is, and it's something that we've been talking about this since probably before I was on the council the first time, and we've had at least 2 studies that since then. So we've studied it, and we have information. I would like for us to put a plan together. If we don't, we will get in a situation like we did on the sewers, where the sewers were not taken care of for a long time. We're all aware of that. Now we're in this catch-up mode that we refined, and let's don't do that again. Let's get ahead of the curve on that.
Well, Election Day is coming up the 4th of November, as I said, Bardstown City Council. So, Fred, we do appreciate you stopping in here. And like I said, if you have any final things you'd like to say to the voters before Election Day,
well, I'd just like to tell the voters that the reason I'm running is because I want to be a part of my community. I want to serve my community. And I think I have the skills to do this. I have done it before. And I promise you that if I am elected, I will dedicate some time to it. I did before, and I will do it again. I have some technical skills, the engineering degree and the MBA. I understand financial statements. I can talk to Mike Abel one day and Larry Hamilton the next, technical and financial. And I want to put those skills to work for you. And I would appreciate it if you would vote for me on November the 4th.
All right. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. Again, it's a candidate profile. Fred Hagan here with us today and talking about Bardstown City Councils. We hope you stick around. We've got a lot more to come here on Central Kentucky TV, and a lot more candidate profiles. But again, November 4th, and then make an educated and informed decision. That's what we're here for. So, Fred, appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And